Everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about some of the changes that happened over the weekend and maybe some front runners when it comes to the meta for anyone looking to use a long-range weapon. We know that the C58 saw a change, the EM2, the Krig, which kind of throws a lot of things out of whack. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. If you enjoy the video, learn something new, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. One thing is this video is a little bit more delayed than usual because I went to Call of Duty Champs. If you guys aren't familiar with what that is, it's basically Call of Duty Professionals. There's actually a league for it. They go and compete head to head on LAN. And I was able to hang out with a bunch of other content creators and that type of stuff. For the C58, which I thought was a really solid weapon, recoil increased. We'll talk a little bit about the difference in recoil. Max damage range decreased, so by 7.4%. ADS speed decreased by 3.4%. And then we also had a bullet velocity decrease, which is actually kind of like not a big deal, but we'll look at the actual difference. We have the EM2, which is the brand new rifle, which was kind of broken. It's still like probably the best sniper support, especially after the change. Maybe you don't have to run a specific optic. You can put an attachment for something else, but we'll get to that. So they sped up the base optic speed by 21%, which ends up being a pretty decent amount. But for most part, if you're going to use a sniper support, you'll probably still use a reflex. And then the upper torso multiplier decrease from 1.1 to 1, which essentially means it does the same damage to the toe as it does to the stomach, as it does to the chest now. And then the only way to speed up the TTK is to get a headshot. And we'll talk about that. And then we have the Krig, which minimum damage decreased from 26 to 25. And there was a lot of people. I wasn't able to test this stuff until today. I was reading a lot of people on Twitter saying, well, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. That is a huge difference because when they mess with base damage values, the big change that's happening is it's also going to impact the multipliers. So if that's going to also impact limb damage, chest damage, headshot damage, which all those values, even if it's 1 here, 2 here, 1 here, 2 here, those values compound and you end up with a situation where essentially the weapon is going to take an extra shot to kill in most situations, which that's the difference from making something meta or not usable. That's simple as it is. And then they also changed the maximum damage range, which isn't that big a deal, especially once you start tacking on attachments. You're talking about 5-8 meters, maybe. But for the most part, you're going to be challenging people beyond that damage. So a little bit less impactful, but it is what it is. So I did what I normally do with these types of things. I double check the ADS speed. I go and check this out, go in here and check the new value with this optic. We go up to see when it mounts and then we go forward and then we get a full mount right around. You can see the background stops moving right there at 384, which means there was a change. So I went through and it did that stuff for all the different changes that it has listed. We went through bullet velocity as well. Double check that. You fire the bullet. You see how long it takes to make contact. You have a distance over time. Boom, you got bullet velocity. Now let's talk about the results. So we have all the various changes here. I went through and I tested the EM2. We have the changes here. So here is the chest shot. So you can see the stuff in yellow is where things were actually modified and you'll notice the difference. One of the biggest differences here is because of this chest shot multiplier, it means you no longer get an easy 6 shot to kill. Before, if you landed a bunch of chest shots, you could have got 1 headshot in the mix, and that would have given you an absurd TTK, which makes up for the fact that this gun is a little bit harder to use for most people, especially at range. So overall, still great sniper support, even though the TTK up close, a little bit less likely. You got to get a headshot in the mix for up close TTK, which means that you're not going to just outgun all these SMGs up close the way you were with this thing because it was pretty nasty as long as you got a chest shot in the mix. Now you have to have a headshot or your TTK isn't all that great up close. So that balances this weapon really well, but makes it a little bit unforgiving as sniper support. And the AK-47 Cold War version is probably still the #1 sniper support because of this TTK difference. And then at range, a lot of people weren't using it at range because of that recoil. So I don't see this one making as big an impact. But overall, still decent sniper support, but Cold War AK is probably still the #1, especially if you can handle the recoil and slower rate of fire. When it comes to the Krig, you can see the various changes here. We had the damage go from 26 to 25, which ends up changing the chest shot from 28 down to 27, which makes it from a 9 shot to kill down to a 10. But this really impacts his bottom section, which you can see right here. It went from 8 chest shots to having to have at least a headshot in the mix, instead of 3 headshots, which sometimes could happen, although rarely, will almost never happen now. So more often than not, you'll end up with a TTK of 828, which isn't all that great. And then every once in a while, when you do get the headshot in the mix, it'll be 736. So even though the TTKs didn't change per se, other than this chest shot one, you're now more likely to get the 828 more often than you were before. And although that's the case, you could still get a good likelihood of getting a 736 TTK. Just keep in mind that it's just going to feel like less frequent, which kind of throws things in the mix. And that is why they also nerfed the C58. Because if they didn't touch the C58 and they nerfed the Krig like this, then everyone just jump on the C58, even though it's harder to use. So what they've done, they've added more recoil, which we'll go and take a look at. The range only impacts it by about 2 meters, not noticeable. The ADS is slower, which is only less than a frame, so not big deal. And then we also have the bullet velocity is now 1145, which is like maybe like a 50 to 100 difference, because most of them before was like 1200. So it's not like a huge difference there. You won't even hardly notice. I don't even know why that change is kind of unnecessary change, but it is what it is. Also with the EM2, I forgot to cover that when I went through, but you can see the ADS speed went from 434 down to 384, which is a 50 millisecond difference. Pretty big difference. But once you start stacking on the GRU suppressor, the extended mag, if you go with the 55, and it's still being slow, you might as well still go with the reflex if you're going to be using it as a sniper support, which it doesn't really have a place quite as well because, like I said, there are other good options. Like I said, with the AK, faster fire rate, and potentially better TTKs. So let's go ahead and look at the recoil, and I'll give you kind of an idea of what you guys should be trying out, checking out, and using going forward. So pretty straightforward here. I fired 30 bullets at a wall. You can see the recoil before this update and the recoil after this update. So there's like a little bit of difference here. 4 bullets a little bit higher. And I basically photoshopped it so I could overlay the one on the left. So it looks like they are side by side, but you can see there's a little bit of discrepancy there. But overall, you can see the difference in recoil patterns. They did increase it. That's what it looks like when you shoot a wall. In feel, it doesn't, I didn't really feel a difference. I was trying to shoot stuff at range and it still felt the same. So overall, I don't feel like this got the nerf it needed. I think there's a couple medium to lower skilled player who are going to be like, this is harder to use. I'm going to stay away from it. But they probably weren't using it to begin with. If you like the C58 before, not a huge difference, but it's still pretty usable. And that's going to bring us to the master spreadsheet. Even though I haven't gone through and updated these ranks, the class setups are relatively the same. None of the attachments were touched. So if you're looking like, why isn't this updated? It's 8.15. That's like 2 weeks ago or whatever. The attachments don't change, so I don't generally go through and update it, even though we can go through and do a rating stream, which we'll probably do on Twitch. But what I wanted to show you here is on the TTK compared. I already went through and updated these with the new TTK values. So we look at the long range options. This is what we have here. And I know it looks like all kinds of crazy numbers. There's different ways you can look at this. We could sort it by the long range TTK or the one headshot TTK, which normally I like to do the one headshot TTK just because that's a little bit more practical. You'll, out of like 10, 11 shots, you should be able to get one headshot in the mix. And that's generally what we're looking for here. If we do that, then we have the fin adverse, which is number 1. Most people don't use that because the recoil, a little bit weird wonkiness. It's an LMG, so it's slow. MG82 is disgusting, but again, it's also slow. Scar doesn't have a big enough mag. Recoil is a little bit weird. Slow fire rate. Like the pros don't outweigh the cons. And then we have the Bruin. Still a disgusting option. People think, oh, why did no one talk about it? It's literally on the top of the list, so it's good, right? We have a PKM. Very good. But again, it's an LMG. Then we have the RPD. Decent. Low recoil. That type of stuff. And it's kind of in there with the Stoner, right? Like it's slightly better than the Stoner now, which is a little bit odd, right? Like the Stoner has a consistent good TTK, but one headshot in the mix with the RPD, especially after they changed it, made it a little bit. Then you have the C58, which we talked about. XM4, some people will struggle with the recoil at range. It just doesn't hit hard like you'd expect. But overall, its TTK is pretty good once you get a headshot in the mix. So maybe try out that for range. AMAX could maybe come back into the mix. Stoner, if you're LMG, a lot of people seem to prefer the Stoner because the base, even no headshots in the mix, is 668, which is pretty solid. And then there's the Farah, which is pretty cool. And then we have the Cold War AK, which they modified it quite a bit for range. Up close, it's still good. But like I said, at range, they made it so you need an extra headshot in the mix. So there's a lot of good options here. Personally, I think people are still going to use the Krig because it's so easy to use. QBZ does come into the mix a little bit because despite it being low on this list, is laser accurate. The likelihood of you actually getting these TTKs is much higher. So the practical TTK, the realistic TTK, is much closer to this number than some of these other ones where maybe you're going to miss a bunch of shots or you're going to get caught reloading. So definitely try out the QBZ. I would say try out the Farah again, C58. MG82 is nasty. I think people forget how nasty it is because of that fire rate. It's an LMG. Pretty good. It still kills incredibly fast. They didn't actually modify that much. They just added a little bit of recoil. But when you stack it fully, not really an issue. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Enjoy the video, learn something new. Please do me a favor, hit the like button. Brand new, want to find your way back? Double check. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Appreciate your support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.